This is the Literacy Mindset Podcast, where education leaders discuss identifying and removing phonological barriers with Mindplay's CEO, Jeff Pendleton.
All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. I'm very excited for another episode of the Literacy Mindset. I'm actually really excited today for my guest, and I'll tell you why in a second. But my guest, Lana Ingram, principal at Harding Charter Preparatory Elementary School in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here with you.
Well, I'm glad for you to be here. Lana is a friend of the Literacy Mindset host, Mr. Jeff Pendleton, because she and I have known each other for over a decade when we met when I was living in Oklahoma City. So really excited to reconnect and have conversations about the things that are happening in the great state of Oklahoma. But first, why don't you just give us a little bit of a background on you and kind of how you got into your spot today?
Okay. So I've been in education for a long time now. It feels like I just keep adding the years. It's been over 20 years now, which is crazy.
Right.
But I've been in the regular classroom. I've been a special ed teacher, and then went into administration, where I've been for the last 5 or 6 years. I spent a lot of time in the public schools for the first part of my career. And the last 9 years, I've been in charter schools here in Oklahoma, which has been a really exciting change for me. I love the direction that charter schools are taking education, especially here in Oklahoma.
Okay.
Giving families the choice to send their kids to a school that may have better opportunities, that can let their kiddos grow no matter where they live, no matter what educational experiences they've had before. So it's been pretty exciting to be in that realm.
Got it. Okay. And so you said in public schools and then charter schools. It's kind of an interesting distinction because charter schools are also public schools, right? So yes. How do we think about it, or how should we think about it if we're orienting ourselves in Oklahoma? How does it work? Is it sponsored? Is it independent? How do charter schools work in Oklahoma?
Sure. Interesting enough, every charter school is a little bit different, so there's not a cookie cutter answer to that.
Okay.
But, every town, city has a public school. You live in this neighborhood, you go to this school, or you have the opportunity to go to this school. Charters are set up in Oklahoma where there is an authorizer, and then you have a governing board, you have your own school district. And every charter school decides how they want to be set up. Some of them are set up they're like a STEM school. Some may be more tech-based. Ours is a college preparatory school district. So our students in middle school and high school are all enrolled in honors level AP classes. And so it's giving students the chance, no matter what, to have the opportunity to take those level of classes, to be prepared for a college. But yeah, charter schools have
our public schools, right?
Our public schools, they are. We do not get bond money. We don't get ad valorem taxes. So we are basically just getting money from state aid. So that is harder a little bit for charter schools. We don't get the same funding, but we spend a lot of time on fundraising. Sometimes some districts will have certain sponsors to help them be funded. Our school district really tries to prioritize what's the most important thing in our district, and we run strictly on state aid. But and then charter schools also get to decide who can enroll at their school. So some charter schools actually do have boundaries, kind of like a city's public school would. Harding, though, is different. We are completely open to anyone. So you could live anywhere as long as you're able to get your student here, they can apply.
Got it. Okay, excellent. And Harding, you mentioned college prep, but you are in an inaugural year of a elementary school, pre-K through 2, correct?
Yes,
That's some really early college prep going on that front. Tell us more about that and sort of the inspiration and why the elementary got started.
Yeah. So Harding actually kind of opened up a little backwards. The high school's been around for over 25 years, and it's one of the highest performing high schools here in Oklahoma, which is pretty exciting. And they merged with another charter school to open their middle school 4 years ago. So that middle school, their charters merged together to become part of our school district. And then we were met with looking at, we had 5th graders coming into the middle school from 50 different elementary schools. Wow. And so they knew we wanted a direct path for families to be able to start students from the very beginning in Harding. And so they opened up Harding Elementary this year. They were able to get the space and a piece of land that had a previous school here. And after some renovations, we were able to open, like you said, pre-K through 2nd grade. We'll continue to grow up through 4th, and then our students will have that clear trajectory all the way through high school for Harding. That way, got it. Yeah, they have that full education from the get-go, from when they're 4 years old all the way through till they graduate.
Okay. Well, this is going to be fun as we dive into the topic of literacy, which is usually what we talk about on the podcast here. You have a unique background. You've spent time in multiple roles, public and charter, public charter side of things. And you've also been in special education, so you've seen intervention. You know the struggles that happen with it, and now you're really focused on early foundational skills in a pre-K through 2 setting in general. So talk us through a little bit. Let's start maybe science of reading. It's a big topic. It's the cool cat to bring up in conversations in circles. Tell us a little bit about where you're at and where Oklahoma's at, maybe in the science of reading journey, and maybe some unique things you can provide for us.
Sure. I think about all the time how a lot of us grew up learning how to read. We were phonics based. I mean, I remember that's how I learned how to read. And so, but then I go to college and I'm teaching, I'm in all these school districts, and things start to shift, and literacy starts to look a little different. And it seems like that phonics piece is missing. I remember teaching kindergarten, and I had these books, and the kids were reading them, and it would say, I like trucks, I like tractors, I like cars. And they really weren't reading. They were looking at the pictures and they can figure out that that's what it says because it was repetitive. And I remember kind of thinking at that moment, that doesn't seem quite right, but
sure,
it's what they gave us. These companies have published all of this curriculum, and they know what they're doing. And I'm a teacher, and I'm just going to follow what I'm supposed to do. And so did that for several years, of course. And
the balanced literacy approach sort of came in and said, hey, maybe we can just guess words at some level.
Yeah.
Right. But it seemed incredible, and it seemed like that's what was going on, right?
Yeah. I mean, some of the biggest names out there and the biggest school districts, that's what we did. And that's what we assumed was the right way. And, some kids were excelling. And then I moved into special education, and same thing, using the same type of curriculum and teaching, look at the picture and, that can help you, or, starts with a C. What do you think it might be? And I remember thinking so many times, what am I saying? It worked fine for some kids, some kids grew, but I noticed for my special education students with learning disabilities, their growth was not what it should be. It just never took off. There would be a little bit here and there. And I'm like, what, kind of not knowing really the right answer. And so then after moving into administration, becoming a principal, there was this big podcast that came out on, told a story, and everybody's talking about it. Hey, in the education world, have you listened to this? Have you listened to this? And I'm driving every morning, 20 or 30 minutes to my school, and I start listening to it, and my heart just like sunk. And it was talking about balanced literacy and these exact curriculums that I had used for, the past 10 plus years with all these kids, and feeling the weight of that's what was wrong. That's why these kids were not growing. Yes, some of them were, because it didn't matter. They were going to get it anyways. Right. But these students that never could grow or get it, this is why. And it was like, why did we make this switch? This is how we all grow up, learning how to read. And then all of a sudden we did something different. And so it was kind of like a mix of emotions of like mad.
Right.
Feeling super defeated and almost like a guilty weight on our shoulders of like, we've done this wrong for kids. For how long have we set all these kids up for failure? And then also there's like just driving force, like, okay, I am the principal and now I got to do something about it. And so I was lucky enough to be in a charter school where you can walk down the hallway or across the street to your superintendent and say, listen, this is what's going on. And I was able to do that. I was able to talk to him. And, I was like, I just want you to listen to this. And I had him go and listen to the podcast. And then we started the conversation of, what do we do? Everything that we have in this building is the wrong curriculum. It's the wrong approach. And I said, I'm willing to take the risk and do what's right by science, by research on how the brain learns how to read. And we need to wipe the slate clean and start all over. So we started talking about how to kind of roll that out. He took it to our school board and they were in full support. We pushed that information out to them too. And they're starting to listen to it. And they were like, okay, let's do it. And like, that is what I appreciated about charters is not that there's anything wrong with our bigger school districts sometimes, but is harder to get through. You can't just
to make
jump in and say, let's make a change, or it's not textbook adoption year, or we don't have the funding to just completely swap curriculum for an entire district. And so I can get into more details of kind of what we did next, but that's kind of, what started that process of changing that completely over, and my aha light bulb moment of, okay, we gotta do something different.
What do you think caused you or allowed you that aha moment, instead of digging in your heels and saying, no, this is it because of what you had been seeing? To your point, you were questioning already, like, why are we not getting the results? And so it just fit. And so it was easy to run with. Is that what you think?
Yeah, it was kind of a lot of things. Like, everything happened all at once. It was, of course, that's my background, like thinking, kind of like, why didn't I think about this before, honestly? But I don't know, you just get into a routine and you do what you're supposed to as a teacher and you follow your plans. But then it was, the podcast is great, but it wasn't just that. It was then talking to some literacy people experts that I knew, that were already, way ahead of the game, looking at states like Alabama and Mississippi, who are way ahead of the game and who, did this years ago, figured it out. And so just like looking at the changes that their districts have made and seeing that data, like, data doesn't lie. Like, you can spitball anything and you can say anything, but when you actually have data out there and they're showing that. And then I started doing letters training at the same time too. And that was when you're really learning about the brain and how you actually do learn how to read. And it all just melded together. I was like, well, yeah, I mean, that's the only way that we're supposed to do it. This other way is not going to work. And so it all just made sense. And I truly believed like we had to make that change, and it was not the wrong way to go.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love hearing that. What do you find as a principal now, teacher? I don't know if you do a lot of hiring of teachers right out of college, but do you feel like there's enough momentum and conversation around science of reading now that teachers are coming out more prepared to do that, or do you feel like there's still a gap?
That's a good question. Because I'm so like passionate about it, I ask them every time.
Okay.
So anytime I do interview, I'm like, hey, tell me about the science of reading. Tell me if they're already teaching. I always tell them to walk me through their reading block. Tell me what that looks like. Or if they're student teaching, what are you student teaching? What curriculum have you used? And it's interesting. It's different. Like it really is. And I think that we've looked at a lot of the universities here. When I was talking to some friends, some universities have really taken the hold and have done a good job of teaching the science of reading and really, helping their students. But there are some that are still behind, like some school districts in Oklahoma are. So I think it's getting there, but it's still mixed, or it's even a little bit of, it's kind of glossed over a little bit. Cause I don't know that I had super stringent, instruction in college either for reading. I really don't remember, a whole lot, but I remember, my letters training. So I've told a lot of fresh out of college students, like go into letters training, go into, whatever it is.
Find something.
Right. Or else I'm just going to sit you in my office and we're going to talk through. I'm going to tell you.
Find it together. You'll get your own education if we can.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you what podcasts, what books to read, what to listen to.
Here's how you'll get a master's degree from the Lana Ingram University side of the world. Right.
Yeah. So it's really mixed. It's not consistent yet, for sure.
Why do you think that is? Do you feel like, to me, I think a lot about essential or foundational literacy skills, the level of explicit instruction that is needed for that, because our brains don't just pick things up. But we seem to know that more naturally with math, right? With the math construct, nobody's going to tell you like, oh no, they don't need to learn how to do math. They'll just figure it out. No, everybody understands. You kind of have to be taught math. Why do you think it's different in reading? Why is it not so well understood and universally adopted that everybody, universities and districts alike, are making sure that teachers know how to teach reading?
Yeah. I wish I knew the right answer to that. I mean, I really do. I think that there's educated people who have to stay educated, who have to stay learning. I mean, if I wasn't reading, if I wasn't talking to other experts, if I wasn't doing any of those things, I think, I don't know how farther back we would have been at the previous school. We probably would have just kept going, I think that there's definitely some really good, there's some good push in United States as a whole.
Right.
A lot of states have actually, have input laws, and they have input policies that this is going to be done. These are the curriculums you have to use, things like that. I'm starting to look at a lot of that. Unfortunately, we're not quite there yet in Oklahoma and in other states too. We're not the only ones. I'm hoping we're going to get there. And so right now it's kind of you're just talking to each other. You're talking about, hey, I heard this or I heard that. And so I think it's the same thing with universities. You have to have the right leaders who know the information, who've heard it, who've read it, who are behind it, or else you're just going to go with whatever is presented to you as the right trajectory. Sadly, it came down to, from listening to the podcast, it came down to money from some of these publishing companies over the years. And that was all it was about. And sadly, that's who we listened to.
Yeah, I know, and that certainly can cloud judgment, and we've known that. We see that in politics and other ways. As educators, we try our best to make sure we cut through the noise and just deliver for the kids on that. But I've always hypothesized that it has a little bit to do with the adjacency of language to literacy, right? Because we speak languages, we do learn language potentially a bit more naturally, organically. We speak it, and then so therefore we assume that because we maybe know how to speak, that it can translate a little bit to reading, and we can just kind of give you some thoughts on it. But yeah, that's a good point. Maybe there's some degree of lack of education around it, and with enough education there, it will come to pass. Tell us a little bit about what it's like founding a new school in a pre-K through 2. So you get a science of reading the crap out of this thing, right? It's like, okay, here we go. We're starting fresh and from 4 years old and on. What does that look like? And how exciting is it to be able to do that from scratch?
It was pretty exciting. When Harding approached me, I was not planning to leave. I was happy where I was at. I didn't leave on bad terms, but just having that opportunity to just say, they said, our background is not in elementary. We're going to let you take the lead. You get to build the school how you want, was pretty exciting. And knowing more kids were going to be impacted by the choices that we made in teaching was pretty exciting. And so I did bring a lot that I had researched over the last couple of years at previous school. And, it doesn't really have to come down to specific curriculum, but, we do that as schools and we do that as school districts. But I remember talking to a friend of mine she's a literacy expert nationally. And she said, the best way, honestly, is kind of like an a la carte literacy. She's like, because there's no perfect thing out there that exists. You have to get what works for you, get what works for your teachers. And so that's what I did. I pieced together what different things I liked. So, our phonics curriculum and phonemic awareness curriculum comes from one company. Our writing comes from a different one. Okay. Our teachers are kind of internalizing a lot of that too, to have the autonomy to teach standards on how they like to, especially vocabulary. Our teachers like to just pick up some good literature, some good children's books, and teach vocabulary that way. Because sometimes I think that those texts are more rich than, some of the short stories that kids may get in some of our box curriculum. Right. And our teachers are the experts. If they're trained in the right way, then they can pick up a children's book and be able to teach all of the parts of literacy that they need to and make it super meaningful. And so we're doing a lot of that. It's a lot of that combined. Okay. And so, it's been exciting, and then for pre-K, we've had a completely different, curriculum for them. That's all encompassing, very thematic, pre-K curriculum.
You would expect it to be, right?
Often is, but it is still we're super happy with what our students are looking at. They're starting to already know sounds and some, initial sounds of words. And so that's pretty exciting. But yeah, it's getting everyone kind of on board with, first of all, here is the curriculum we picked. We're going to teach it explicitly, no matter what, because, that's what we need to do. And then changing our mindset on some different things like sound walls instead of word walls.
Right.
We are teaching letter sounds over letter names, making sure writing's there, and going through the developmental stages of writing. And then again, letting teachers really kind of teach from some good quality texts.
Right.
And then because we're early childhood, it is a lot of exposure. You talked about language. We're seeing, I see a huge shift in these last few years after COVID of language development in our students. And it's not what it used to be. So we are really, I feel like having to do a lot more of that. You're just talking through everything, telling teachers talk like you're going to commentate your entire day. Right. But a lot of our students are coming to us with a lot of language deficits. And, it shows us that if they don't have that, then it's going to continue into their future skills, and that's going to be impacted as well. So it's just a lot of talking within our staff all the time about that.
Do you have a hypothesis on the growing or increase in language deficit? I think what would we have counted? 2015 would have been sort of the iPad generation for students. So now we've kind of almost have a decade of iPads. And so you've been living this for the last 9 years as an administrator. Yeah. Does that contribute to it, do you think? Or
I definitely think it contributes. I think it is interesting. I think our kids have the potential to have a lot more language because they have access to
theoretically
everything.
Exposed to tremendous amounts of language, right?
Theoretically. But, there's also a lot of research about actual conversations.
So
with
repressed
people.
Production. They're not producing language as much because they're more consuming it.
Yes. And so it's like they can maybe spitball a whole bunch of things, but they can't have a conversation. They can't respond to questions. They can't comprehend some, basic stories. And so I definitely think, the technology shift has definitely impacted language. I think that, the years of COVID, kiddos who were not getting to go to, Mother's Day out or getting to go out and visit family or getting to go that limited language. If they were home and families were having to work to make ends meet, then some of that early language was not there. So I think it's kind of in tandem. I'm seeing
almost a compounding effect of
iPads,
devices, and a freaking pandemic that almost shifted how we raise kids for a couple of years.
Well, and I think too, not even kiddos on iPads and such, but parents.
That's true.
How often do we
conversation back and forth between parents?
Yeah. You sit in a restaurant now and you look around and how many families are actually talking or how many families are just all on their devices. And so I think that we're losing so much of that initial, and there is, there's a huge, like I said, research behind that early language is really going to set the precedence for how a student progresses in reading, even in third grade. And so trying to help our teachers understand some of that and how we can build that in our students.
Yeah. Okay. That's true. Well, we could sit here and talk for a long time about this. I love hearing about it. Some amazing things that you have going on there. Maybe let's just kind of wrap up here. Final question on maybe the thread that we're talking about. What do we see 10 years from now? Right now, we've seen the impact of iPads and technology over the last 10 years. Obviously, the last 5 years in COVID. Now project out. Obviously, no projecting any more pandemics, please. I'm not. I don't want that. But what do you think is gonna stay true? And that's one way I like to predict the future. What do I think won't change? Right. I think I tell my team all the time. I don't think teachers are going to want it to be harder. So let's assume that we can predict the future by saying they're going to keep wanting their programs to be easier to use. So how would you think about it in that framing? What do you think is going to stay true and you like it? Or what do you think maybe needs to change?
Gosh, I think that, teachers are going to continue to do everything they can. Educators are going to do everything they can to teach kids. And I think we're going to continue to ebb and flow with the newest things that come out. I mean, like you said, we do want what makes it easier for us to reach the most kids and students. I think that we're going to continue to, work with our students and get them to where they need to be the best that we can, no matter what curriculum we have, no matter what school district we're in. Most teachers have that plan. They want students to exceed. I think that what we're going to have to do, and we've talked about this in our district, is we have to get our families on board to be a team.
Okay.
There's a lot of countries that it's really like a big team. It's not, your teachers against families, it's all together. And so we've talked about communicating with parents, and it's really like mobilizing them to say, put the iPads away and talk at the dinner table, or, you walk down the cereal aisle, like you actually go grocery shopping, like go into a grocery store. And if your student's learning letters, go find the letter A, go find, actual like hands-on things that you can do with your students. And so I think that is something we're going to have to change. We're going to have to change that societal look of you are your child's first teacher, and we want to work with you, and we want to mobilize you with what we need. Otherwise, we can't do it all on our own, because it's not going to work that way. So.
Well, that's very insightful. I love the way thinking about that. And we have a lot of work to do to make sure that that's available to new parents and parents that are raising young children in particular. How do we arm them with the tools, instead of how convenient we've made your life that you can now order your groceries on your phone? Yeah. But now that means you're not talking to your kids about the celery and the apples, and maybe that has long-term effects on language production. So that's a great thought. Thank you for giving us that perspective and your insights and wisdom. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today, and hopefully we'll connect again soon.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love to hear from you. Learn how we help students by identifying and removing phonological barriers at mindplay.com.